Well, hey, gang, and welcome to today's virtual lecture. I guarantee you're really going to enjoy what we're going to do today. We've got some tremendous speakers who I wish we could fly individually to class to visit with each of us. However, it doesn't work that way, of course. But I've got some great speakers that we're really going to learn from today, talking about how sports media is changing. What's happening today, for those of us who are on the air, is different than it was 3 years ago, clearly from 5 years ago, and dramatically juxtaposed to 10 years ago. So what am I talking about? Well, what we do on the air is different today, clearly, than what it used to be. It used to be we were very serious, coat and tie, and now we're a little bit more casual. We're a little bit more get with the times, right? Now, there are times that we wear coat and tie, quite obviously, right? But at the same time, we are trying to be a little bit more fun on the air, because people seem to like that. People seem to gravitate. I don't know if you've seen it. America's Nuttiest Pregame Show is something we do each week. So that's the open to our show, and then ordinarily we've got a GoPro in the car and we're driving around campus talking about the Hokies and candidly joking about each other. That's really what it's about, and it's not serious, but it's sponsored by Whitley's Peanuts, and they're happy with it, and we're able to track the results of their marketing. Well, they are through their sales, and we are through how many people are watching, and we can see how long people watch the show digitally, that type of thing. But today, we got some great guests. They're going to talk about how their careers have changed and how they're presenting material to the fan base. Rich Eisen, who used to work for ESPN, now with the NFL Network and host of The Rich Eisen Show. And then we're going to have the crew from the Dan Le Batard Show talking about a really fascinating topic. Former NFL quarterback, now analyst Kurt Warner, trying to figure out how pundits and commentators are able to comment on NFL football after watching one game, while he, as a former quarterback, has to spend hours and hours breaking down tape to come either to A, the same conclusion, or B, a different conclusion. And finally, we're going to hear from Stephen A. Smith, who sat down with the crew at Bloomberg as a panelist and talk about his career and some of the same topics. So let's start with Rich Eisen. You know, Rich was a SportsCenter anchor who your folks or your aunts and uncles probably watched back when SportsCenter was the king, and Rich was one of the guys. Well, now, of course, he's host of NFL Network and the host of The Rich Eisen Show. And he recently sat down with the Barstool guys on the bus to talk about the changing landscape of sports media. And when I first saw this, I said, dang, I got to show this to our class. And everyone in SMA needs to watch this.
With the media now, and you kind of see this big transition, McAfee getting to ESPN, it seems more loose. It's like the suit and tie is kind of going away. What have you seen since the beginning of being on ESPN to now, how much it's integrated more of like a casual, it seems much more casual now than it did even 10 years ago.
We're on a bus, right?
Well, yeah, but we're not a major network.
No, but you you are. Barstool's a major
network. But I'm talking about like the Fox Sports, NFL
like what,
Network,
I guess traditional
ESPN,
media you're
traditional
talking about?
media, yeah.
Right? I mean,
because you see, it seems like it's changing quite a bit.
That kind of TV.
That kind of TV right there. That suit that you picked out and you said, this
Men's
is the
Warehouse,
one.
buddy.
This is the one.
Men's Warehouse from Houston,
TVs that
Texas.
has-
I remember where I bought
Not
that.
a bad mop on top of the head there. That's good.
Look at that.
You miss it?
You shouldn't. Hey, you shouldn't.
Do you ever?
You're a good looking bald guy.
Yeah. You
Let me
have
tell
a
you
good shaped
something.
head.
Do I? By the way, thank you.
That's a win.
It's a win. Now I'm glad I flew to Nashville.
There
I
it
feel
is.
better about myself and the shape of my
Words
head.
of affirmation, brother. That's what we're here for.
Thank you, guys.
But
We're
do you
all
miss
together. Yeah, of course I do.
But
Are you kidding me? Of course I do. But I'm also more aware of people's hair now.
Are you?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'm more aware of it. But I look at stuff like that. It's so weird, like certainly when I'm watching with my kids and you're watching a 30 for 30 or something, and my face will pop up like the Jordan documentary, The Last Dance.
Mm-hmm.
They pop me up showing a Rodman, doing a Rodman lead in from when he, bolted the team or whatever. And my kids are just like, "That's you?" I'm like, "Yep, that's me." And great picture right there. I remember we did that once upon a time. That was Nate Burleson's haircut back in the day on NFL Network. So they put that on my hair. But I miss my hair. Thanks for asking.
No worries.
Yeah, but what the difference is again, like, content can come from anywhere. Players now instead of speaking after games, will go and do their own podcast.
Mhm.
You know, their own material isn't just what they put on a stat sheet. It's what happens on the floor or a field or a court. And then they take it to their own microphone. You know, so post-game press conferences aren't as crucial for them to do. Obviously, from my perspective, it's crucial for them to do because there's still a viability in having a professional questioner ask questions of an athlete after a contest. But so there's that. Streaming. My show's streaming every single day. And that's not so-called traditional, but I think at some point people will view that as traditional media.
Right.
And then you guys, I mean, you're perfect examples.
We are, aren't we?
You are. Yeah. I mean, you honestly, you are. Is that what you do and how you do it? And you've got an audience, a significant audience, and an audience that is very, die hard. And so you may not be traditional because you're sitting on a bus and people will, consume you in a way that's not just taking a remote and popping a television on. Doesn't mean that it's it just means it's a different world.
There's obviously so many more ways to consume entertainment now. For you, is it more difficult because you have to follow so many more outlets? Because it used to be pop on ESPN, NFL Network.
No, I mean, I guess, I hate the word social media. It just sounds so stupid, but, but I also can't say X either. Mm-hmm. So I'll say Twitter till I die, but that, I'll look at that or other, news outlets or whatever. I'll see it that way. Mm-hmm. But, it changed SportsCenter. I mean, that happened, when I started SportsCenter in 96, or when I started with SportsCenter in 96, SportsCenter had already been, like 15 years old at that point in time, or 17 actually. But when I first went on the air with that Flock of Seagulls haircut, people were tuning into SportsCenter because they hadn't seen the game, or that they'd seen it once. We assumed you hadn't seen a highlight of it yet. So you're tuning into a highlight show to see what happened or see it again for the first time.
Especially with baseball too. Like you get the top 10 baseball at nighttime, you're like caught up on all the games that kind of happened that day.
Sure. So that's the way it started. And then towards the end of it, again, I know I keep aging myself on the show, but with the advent of phones and the popularity of the internet, I kid you not, man, it's the truth.
Yeah.
That SportsCenter went from the show I just described to assuming anybody who was watching it had already not only seen the game, known the result, but had already seen highlights of it multiple times in the palm of your hand or on your home computer. And so the show then changed for an anchor from being, somebody who's turning a phrase, dropping a line here and there, having fun and giving out the information, to being a host of two analysts arguing why something happened. Mm-hmm. And I freaking hated it. I didn't like it at all. So with less highlights, instead of doing a highlight that was 2 minutes long, it's now 40 seconds long. Let's bring an analyst on. Like when Sean Salisbury and John Clayton had schoolyard fights, and I was the anchor sitting in the middle of it saying, okay, guys, let's move on, and I hated that. Hated it. I complained about it, and I don't know if that's the reason why I was handed a cardboard box, but I was. And so, the show changed. I didn't want to do it as much anymore as they wanted me to do it. So there was a parting of the ways about 9 days before my wedding. And so my head was completely spinning, and NFL Network, was the obvious choice for me to.
How soon after the ESPN?
Right away.
So even right before the wedding, you're
right away.
You're
absolutely.
With NFL Network.
No doubt. And
so your head was spinning for like 12 hours.
Well, no, because I had another option too.
Somebody texted him, was like, "Hey,
nice.
Hey, heard you got fired. No, you want this job?" And he's like, "Oh my God, my life is horrible." All right, I'll take it.
No. In all honesty, I thought I'd be at ESPN forever. It was my, identity. 26-year-old kid, SportsCenter, ESPN. It was like the
program.
It was 100 million households, and and then the other option I had at the time was Turner Sports was remaking their Braves broadcast. They wanted me to be the play-by-play guy for the Braves broadcast, and I just got married. Didn't want to start my marriage off by saying I'm going on the road for 70 games. Just probably wouldn't have been a really productive job for me.
Made it hard, the honeymoon hard.
And so, and then the other option was move out to Los Angeles and plant a flag for NFL Network for an executive named Steve Bornstein, who was the president of ESPN when I first started there, and he handpicked me to start NFL Network. And I'm like, that's it. So I went and I did that. But it was an identity crisis where I'm like, what the hell am I going to do? And
was the firing sudden? Or
hell yeah! Like we had like
kind of felt like that.
No, we had like 72 hours left in a negotiating window, and then I got a fax. My agent got a fax saying we were done, and then 10 minutes later, a phone call from USA Today asking for comment on why I wasn't renewed. And I'm like, well, who the hell said that to them? Because only my future wife and my agent at the time knew that this had happened. Man, like, holy shit! Your wife would do that to you. But listen, I honestly, I have nothing but the fondest of memories from them and friends galore. Like, still, I'm tight with a lot of people from back then. Dan Patrick, Keith Olbermann, KO, and I will text frequently. Chris Fowler was at my wedding. I just saw him the other, couple months ago. I love the guys, and Linda Cohn, a bunch of people I'm still friendly with. Long story short, though, that's the difference. You know what I mean? Like how the business has changed. That was from 96 to 03. Now this is 21 years later. And that's the thing I love about the show that I do is that every day, if you want to watch it live, you can, on the Roku channel. And then you want to listen to it live, you can on terrestrial radio with Westwood One, or you want to Sirius XM or tune in if you want to stream it. Odyssey, if you want to stream it live, you can. If you want to watch it on demand, there's the Roku channel has that. It also repeats on the channel 210 that I'm on, and there's also YouTube clips, and then there's also the podcast version of it, all 3 hours, so you can listen to it on demand. You can also we chop it up. Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and all that. So there's different ways of distributing stuff now, even better. Yeah. Quite honestly, it just used to be just one viewing somewhere. Now it's you can put it everywhere. Right, because people don't have either the time or inclination to take in something live. They have a right to listen to it or watch it whenever they want. Mm-hmm. So if you can cover all those bases, like that's the win. And that how much better is that than the past? Mm-hmm. So that's how it's changed.
I know it's been 21 years since you were at ESPN, but what did you miss the most from ESPN? Because going from doing all sports to just NFL, you're talking about how much you love baseball. You knew every single team, every single player.
Right.
Do you miss that stuff, or is that just
I still get to I get to still do it on a daily basis on my daily show, but if I missed anything about it, it was just the platform. I mean, those 4 letters are pretty popular.
Yeah.
Right. You feel like that's the pros.
I'll never forget. So I started with NFL Network. We went on the air week 11 or week 10 of the 2003 season. I don't know why we decided to start in the middle of the season. We weren't ready. Ducks didn't get in a row, whatever. At any rate. So we were 11 weeks old during our first Super Bowl. And so my wife, like I told you, she's in the business as well. So she was working with NBA TV and Turner. She did some sideline for TNT, NBA on TNT. And so the NBA All-Star game was in LA of February of 2004. Again, NFL Network launched in November of 2003, and about 15 million homes in NFL, and ESPN was in like 110 million homes at the time. And so I basically willingly, or not willingly, but again, I got handed a cardboard box, but 100 million eyeballs lopped off of what I was doing, just like that. And so I went as Susie's +1 to a couple of these NBA parties for the All-Star game. And some guy comes up to me and goes, "Rich Eisen, I watch you every day." And I'm like, oh, wow, this is cool. So I can crowdsource how he's watching NFL Network, because I didn't know who was watching it at the time. Okay. So I said, oh, wow, you get NFL Network? He goes, what's that? And I'm like, that's what I'm on. He goes, you're not on ESPN anymore? And I'm like, I haven't been on since last May. That was my last SportsCenter, May of 2003. I mean, I haven't been on ESPN in like 8 months, 9 months. He goes, really? And I'm like, yeah. And he paused and he goes, "Are you all right?" That's what he said to me, and I'm like,
Were you?
well, I said to him, well, at that point in time, I was now offended. I'm like, you know, like I'm standing in front of you, like talking.
I'm
like,
alive, aren't I?
You have a mirror, I'll fog it up for you.
Yeah.
You know, like I mean, to get aggressive on the guy. He came up to me, said he was a fan, you know, but I'm like, you know, I'm kind of, you know, got my hackles up.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, but that was the general sense of why would you, I even get those questions today. Why did you leave ESPN? Why would you do that? Like, 20
something years later.
Yeah. But I'll still, walking through an airport, have people hum the SportsCenter theme at me as I'm going through security. You know,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Leaving a mark,
which is great.
That honestly makes sense because with social media not as big as it is now, like you're able to know any move that happens. Like when Skip leaves FS1 or Fox, you know about it, you know why, you know the rumors.
Yeah,
everybody's
right.
tweeting and posting. But when NFL Network was coming on, what years was that again?
03.
Right. So like
we're
in high school going into college. You almost just see you are now on NFL Network, and you're almost thinking like it's hard to disassociate the two. Like, okay, the NFL Network might just be ESPN. It's like maybe they just have them on this show, to where you really didn't know that there's like, oh, there's NFL Live going on, and then there's like what was it on? What are the two different shows? It was NFL Live and the other comparable one on
NFL Total Access.
NFL Total Access. Yeah. To where then you started to realize like, okay, there's two
different
networks now.
I
wonder
but
what
when
happened.
you're in high school too, you're not realizing like these other businesses are doing X, Y, and Z. You're thinking, oh man, they all work together.
Right, exactly.
There was no NFL Live when NFL Network started, and I you know, again, I will
trailblazer.
It's not just me; it's literally everybody that started NFL Network and has worked on it.
Mm-hmm.
To be very honest with you, like when we first started, you know, I remember I went on Kimmel's show to help promote it. And he even said to me, he goes, "What are you going to talk about?" He said to me that you'll be back on ESPN by the spring, and it was a big laugh line in the room. Mm-hmm. It's funny. It was funny, but it did kind of like, you know, hit me in the gut a little bit here.
Taking a lot of gut shots during this time.
But that's what a lot of people were saying. What are you going to talk about when there's no games on? I remember, again, one of the final SportsCenters I did in April of 03. We were in an ideas meeting before, like, what are we going to do? We have some time to fill. And somebody brought up, let's do a breakdown of, you know, some of the top team, you know, secondaries in the NFL. Like, let's break it down.
Mm-hmm.
What are the best secondaries? They were laughed out of the room. They're like, what are you talking about? It's opening day. It's Masters. It's March Madness. We're going to talk football. Literally, that was said in the room. Now, there's 15 other shows like that on ESPN and everywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is large part to NFL Network showing you can talk about it every day. You not only can talk about it every day, there's a market for it. There's an insatiable appetite for it. You know, we mercilessly made fun of to have a show based on the schedule being released. Because again, you know when a season's over, the next season, who plays who and who plays who where. You know it. It's all handled based on what year it is for your team to play another division, and then where your team finished in your division order. Then you suddenly play other teams in other divisions to finish in the same place. You know exactly. Just the only thing you don't know is the order of where you play them and on what channel and at what time. That's the only difference.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically we made a show celebrating the you know, announcement of paperwork. You know what I mean? Like, here's your schedule, and we made a big deal out of it, and we had merciless fun made of us.
Mm-hmm.
Now everybody's fascinated about it.
Yeah.
Oh my God, now you're playing 3 out of 4 on the road in December? Like, that's NFL Network. The Combine, perfect example. You know, now some coaches don't even go to the Combine because they watch it on NFL Network. They get a better view of shit than they do up in the stands through their little binoculars. You know, so I will absolutely, on behalf of everybody, take credit for the NFL being everywhere right now.
The NFL has done a great job
100%.
of making it a year-round event. Everything that you hit, the schedule, the draft, the combine.
Right.
Like in July, you guys are still talking about things.
Like,
It's
exactly.
wild.
Now people can't wait for training camps to open.
Right.
Like,
and there's always rumors floating around.
Whoever, you know, the first day of training camp, I bet in 03 when we first launched, there might have been like 5 reporters in these places.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, now it's who's
everywhere.
not signed, who's going to get signed, like what's going to happen. And fans are just like, who am I going to draft in my fantasy teams? It's unbelievable, you know? So absolutely, it's totally changed. You know, and in terms of just one last thing on the ESPN thing, like the biggest exposure distribution I've ever had in my career were those 2 a.m. Sports Centers and then 1 a.m. Eastern Sports Centers that I did with Stuart mostly, where we would do it live, and then we would wait till whatever games on the West Coast were done, if they were still going on, close the show up, edit it together, like folks would edit it together, but it would be edited together after we were done with it. And if there was any mistakes live, we'd have to stay afterwards and fix them. That's a lonely moment at like 3:20 in the morning when you have fucked up and everybody's got to stay late because of your screw up. You know what I mean? That's not fun. But we would do it, and then I would go home, 4 a.m., 4:30, try and just calm down because you're hyped up from doing it, go to sleep, and then at 5 a.m., that show would re-air all the way through to 1 in the afternoon, and I would be dead asleep for 7 of those hours. While I'm asleep, everybody's watching it. Biggest exposure of my career television-wise was when I was sleeping for those. And to this day, I will still get people come up to me, and it freaks me out, because they're there with their children to say, I watched you before going on the school bus. Before I went off to 5th grade, I would watch you and Stuart do this thing. Nowadays, there would never be a show that's 7 hours old that's shown on TV. You know what I mean? Like news is breaking. Now there's Get Up and First Takes and all of this shit. I shouldn't say shit, but all of this stuff that's on the air.
All this shit.
By the way, I don't want it to sound like I'm disrespectful. All this stuff that's on my show is part of the shit. We're talking about stuff that's on the air happening right now. And TV shows that are radio shows that are simulcast on the TV. I mean, Dan Patrick is the pioneer of that. My show was put on after his on DirecTV. That's the way my show exists. Is that Dan showed it can be done, and so they hired me to go after Dan, and so at any rate, long story short is that's the difference, as well as I still get people, it blows me away. They're like grown ass men who are like 40, 38, 37, women who 35. Are that age as well, 35, who are 20 years younger than me.
I'll be 35 in September.
Holy shit.
September 19th.
So yeah.
Okay. Great. So, yeah, I will get that. And I love it. It's obviously a blessing to be, here in 2024 and have literal generations who are older saying that they remember, when I did stuff.
That's Rich Eisen. And I think you guys can understand how smart Rich is. He went to Michigan for undergraduate. He did his master's at Northwestern, really smart guy. And he's had to adjust his career and how he presents things because the viewing habits, the listening habits, media consumption habits have changed clearly, and they will continue to change. Which brings us next to the Dan Le Batard Show. And when I saw this, my first instinct was, dang, everyone in SMA needs to watch this as well. And basically, Dan, like Rich, was with ESPN, and now he's got his own show, Dan Le Batard Show, which lives digitally as a podcast and as a television show as well. His topic that we're going to talk about deals with former NFL quarterback turned analyst Kurt Warner, who is very good. But he, Kurt, was wondering, why do I have to spend hours and hours and hours breaking down tape, looking at film, watching the same play 8 or 9 times? That's what coaches and players do, right? It takes them 10, 12 hours to get through a single game because they watch every play 2 or 3 times, and then they watch it from 4 or 5 different angles, right? You've got the all-22, then you've got the end zone camera, then you've got maybe the camera from behind the quarterback, and you're watching every offensive lineman's first step, every wide receiver's first step, so you've got to watch it over and over. And Kurt's wondering why some people are able to comment on the NFL and be taken seriously when it takes hours to break down a game. And they're able to pull this off in a couple of minutes and put out a tweet or get on the air and opine about something that maybe they don't really know, but they're just trying to get clicks or trying to get viewers. And what we're going to watch now on the Dan Le Batard Show, I think, is a really fascinating discussion, because at the end of the day, as we talk about all the time in our SMA classes, sports journalism is a combination of, journalism and show business. And sometimes that line gets crossed a little bit, right? What is real journalism and what is real show business? A dog walking behind the chair as I'm shooting this. Perhaps a mild bit of entertainment for you, right? But what is the show business aspect of it, and what is the sports journalism aspect of it? And that's really the heart of what this Dan Le Batard clip is about. Take a look.
Kurt Warner said this on Monday, and I want to, after football games, and this is the part that I want to talk to you about. I want to talk to you about documentaries, too, as I see that Oprah and Apple are fighting, and she just bought back. She didn't like the documentary that Apple was doing, so she just bought it back from Apple. And
must be nice.
Yeah. Kurt Warner says on Monday, I've been grinding tape since 8 p.m. last night, and I have gotten through 10 games. How do all of these people talk about these players and teams on a Monday as if they've watched the games and really can evaluate them? Can you guys share your routine so I can see if it's more efficient? And then Ryan Fitzpatrick gets in with, I would recommend a healthy dose of Red Zone and Stephen A. Anything more than this, and you're wasting your time, Kurt.
It's a great tweet.
I mean, this part is interesting to me because Kurt Warner is unbelievably meticulous about what his analysis is going to be, and he's going to be careful about criticizing people because he lived it, and he wants people, if they're going to criticize, to be informed and not be flippant. But the grand majority of most football coverage on television on Mondays is less informed and prepared than Kurt Warner's, but we got to go to market. And so not everyone's breaking down game tape. And what do you do with what it is that Kurt Warner is saying there? Because he's trying to play the game fair, but that's not what's going to get rewarded. It's not going to. ESPN has Orlovsky. They have NFL Live. They have Ryan Clark doing some film breakdown. McAfee does a ton of it because people do like film breakdown. But he's not wrong when he says this is a super complicated sport. And in order to analyze it correctly, you got to be thorough, and you can't do it on all of the games on Monday morning.
So Dan, let me tell you. So first and foremost, it always blows my mind. Whatever your sport is, whether it's football, whether it's basketball, whether it's baseball, or whether you are a generalist, a sports generalist, right? The people who said, I had Bucks Raiders on that screen, and you're full of. There's no way you can watch multiple games at the same time and be detailed and nuanced.
Correctly.
You can watch it, popcorn and beer, sure. Wings and beer. Oh my God, he just had it. You can do that. You cannot watch and retain information and nuanced information to do the job.
But you're talking about this the way that you watch basketball. You and I watch basketball differently. You're sitting there watching every possession, and you're doing analysis on adjustments that I'm not doing. I am doing popcorn and a drink. I'm not analyzing what has Spoelstra done in this timeout while I'm watching 4 other basketball games.
So when you put that in that perspective, Dan, if you are watching, and this is why it always tickles me when people watch general sports shows. What Kurt Warner's talking about, he's talking about NFL specific, and we'll get to that in a second. But people who watch First Take, Undisputed, those kind of shows, and then yell and argue about what Stephen A. or Skip or Shannon says. Do you think these people watched every single sporting event with a keen eye and and nuance and with the DVR pausing?
Well, I do wonder though. I wonder what the audience, given the power.
There's a difference. That's what I'm building to. Is there's a difference between a general sports analyst and a sports-specific analyst.
There's a difference that you're making that I don't think the audience is making. I believe the power of television is such that if there's expertise being blown in my face on television, that especially if it's morning television, especially if it's the audience that has historically been around morning television, which back before the pandemic wasn't working. During the day, was at home instead of being somewhere that they had to be working. Those people were watching sports, and I don't believe they're making the distinction that you're making between Stephen A. says this and Kurt Warner says that. They might say Kurt Warner knows more because he's a quarterback, but they're not going to say Kurt Warner's analyzing that game because he's breaking down tape in a way that Stephen A. Smith isn't. I don't believe those are distinctions being made by an audience.
I think the other thing, too, is when you look at those morning day television parts where people don't want to hear a Cover 2 shell breakdown, right? Like, you want to hear the headlines of the day. You're tuning in to hear, oh, the Cowboys lost 45-19. What's happening with Dak? Did he deserve the money that they gave him at the beginning of the season? It's hard to break down nuance, like, oh, the corner was shading to the inside here. That's why he was able to beat the man on the, like, those kind of things are tough to digest early in the morning, if at all.
No, absolutely. Like, that's a morning show. No one's coming for hard analysis. They're coming for just get me caught up on everything that happened last night because I went to bed early, right?
Is Kurt Warner attacking like Stephen A here, or is he attacking fans?
He's not attacking. He's asking. He's almost not like, bless his heart. He's like, how's everyone else doing this? Am I doing this wrong?
Well, I think he's being sarcastic.
Well,
I think he's seeing a lot of bloviating on television and saying these people are giving very strong opinions without being as informed as I am about the opinions that they're giving.
It's an obnoxious tweet from Kurt Warner.
No, guys, you got this all wrong. Kurt Warner's a nice guy, man.
I know he's a nice guy, but he's being like, it's kind of like we did a thing here when we went out to Dolphins training camp a few years ago. For the next 3 weeks, we were all just like, I was out at camp, and whatever I say after that, that's what he's doing here. Like, all right, I just want everyone to know I'm watching all these games. Like, we get Dan Orlovsky does this stuff too, where he posts a video. He's just like, just so you know, I've been diving into the tape here. It's like, you're watching a little tape, okay? You don't need to overstate it. They're just shoving in our face. We get it. You're smarter than us, Kurt Warner. We get it. You know football. Like that. That's really what he's doing there. He's like, I know. I don't know what everyone else is doing, but I'm watching every game, every play, and it's like, we get you.
I don't know why you guys are getting a Kurt Warner here, man. He's a nice guy. They made a movie about him.
I like Kurt Warner. I'm just saying. This is a look at me Louis tweet.
I don't know if you do.
This is a look at me Louis tweet. This is him saying, I watch tape and the film better than everybody else, as you should. Look at me Louis. It's like, yeah.
You co-signing this nonsense?
Well, you keep coming back with Kurt Warner's a nice guy, which no one disputes.
Too sweet to be sarcastic.
Too sweet to be sarcastic.
I don't believe that was a genuine question that he was throwing at the internet. Please, internet, help me be more efficient at how I study football. Please teach me, Juan Lemonface 46534. Are you breaking down more film than I am?
And Ryan Fitzpatrick in that tweet, like, he senses what I got. So he's like, let me give him a little something here. Like, oh, you're going to be, we get you, Kurt. You're watching all the film.
All right, so the guys mentioned Stephen A. Smith during that. We're going to talk with Stephen in a moment. But I want you to really understand what Le Batard was talking about there. I don't think that at the end of the day, Kurt Warner was trolling anybody. I think he's really serious that he spends so much time in front of his computer breaking down tape, watching things over and over and over, scrolling on his iPad, and he wants to know where people are coming up with these opinions in 2 minutes or less, because it takes a long time for coaches to really know what's going on. And sometimes a coach has to go back and watch the tape over and over before he or she can provide an accurate answer to the media. And it's a really interesting discussion point for sure. Anyway, they did mention Stephen A. Smith during their discussion, as you just saw. And Stephen was a recent guest on a Bloomberg panel. And same thing as the first two guys, Rich specifically, and obviously Le Batard, really smart guy. And you may like, or maybe you don't like, Stephen A. Smith. He's certainly one of the highest paid guys at ESPN, one of the highest paid sports people in media anywhere. He recently joined Bloomberg for this panel.
What's going on?
You're the closer.
Is that what they call me?
Yeah.
Thank you.
We closed with Snoop yesterday. We're closing with you today.
I like it. How's everybody doing?
Good. When'd you get into town?
I got into town yesterday.
Okay.
I had to go do first take and all of that stuff, take care of some business, and now I am here.
Okay.
Well, I got to fly out of town and do a first take from Tennessee State, HBCU, tomorrow. Yeah.
When you started your career, being a columnist at a national newspaper was probably the most influential job you could have in sports media. You had talk radio, ESPN blew up. You're now the most recognizable sports talk person sports media personality, I would say. How do you see your business changing with streaming and social media and what you have to do to sort of stay on top?
Well, you've got to diversify. You've got to make sure that you're paying attention to what the audience wants. You have to understand that who your audience is and where they are. The audience that listens to you on radio might be different than the audience that's watching you and listening to you on your podcast and your YouTube show. Might be different than the audience that's watching you at 10 o'clock in the morning on First Take. For me personally, it's not that challenging from the standpoint that working at ESPN, there's always been a potpourri of shows. What you saw from me on First Take might be a little bit different than what you saw from me on NBA Countdown. It might be a little bit different than what you saw from me when we had Outside the Lines. It might be a little bit different than when you see me on the Sports Center. A lot of times also the personality that you're working with comes into play. Somebody that's hosting the 6 o'clock Sports Center might be different than somebody that's hosting the 11 o'clock, might be different than somebody that's hosting the overnight. You're coming on before games, so you have a certain attitude. And then another show, you're coming on post game. So it's a different attitude because you saw a different, so you got some highlights. You saw a different level of excitement that you want to ingratiate yourself with and gravitate to. And so I've always been about the business of making sure that I was multifaceted in my presentation and my delivery, and just to make sure that I'm appealing to the audience and being mindful and cognizant of who actually is out there watching at a particular moment in time in the day or what have you, and what you need to do and what you need to deliver, because everybody's looking for something different.
Yeah. Where do you think the most people watch you now? Is it on ESPN? Is it YouTube? Is it some other social network?
Well, I would tell you, once upon a time, I would have easily said it's ESPN, and you can easily say that now because of the success of First Take. I mean, when you think about the audience, at 10 o'clock in the morning when people are at work or in school or whatever, we're averaging nearly 500,000 viewers live over video. I personally average over 2 billion views a year, so I know that. And then that's just with First Take. That doesn't take into account Sports Center and NBA Countdown. And then now that I've got my YouTube show, I've had it for about 18 months now. I've got about 877,000 subscribers. This month alone, I did over 18 million views. I've had over 2.2 million watched hours and stuff like that. And so you're looking at those numbers and you're saying, well, that's just 3 days a week. And that's me talking about pop culture and entertainment with the P. Diddy scandal or whatever. And, it's not me getting into sports as heavily. It's not even getting into politics as the election draws near, especially because there were times that I was talking about Trump. I was talking about Kamala Harris. I was on the air 8-9 months ago saying Joe Biden needed to step down. It just ain't there anymore. I was saying that. I didn't say it enjoyingly. I said, you certainly don't want to be denigrating the president of the United States or anything like that. But I saw what I saw. And so for me, talking to that audience, knowing that they're not familiar. At one time, they weren't familiar with that, but then those algorithms kick in. You talk about it enough, all of a sudden your name comes up. You make headlines, and then they attach you to those subject matters, and then before you know it, you have an even bigger audience that you never anticipated. And so I think the exciting part for me is the answer to that question is ESPN, but it was definitively and very quickly ESPN.
And now you can say
a year ago, and now I'm saying, it's changing.
Right.
It's changing. They still watching me on ESPN, but the audience is growing on YouTube.
Does ESPN get upset if you talk about politics?
No. I mean, they did once upon a time. And I think that Jimmy Pitaro, the president of ESPN, he came on in 2018, and when he took over for John Skipper, who had exited, he was on the record saying that we need to veer away from politics, and there was a whole bunch of my colleagues that were very upset with me for co-signing that mandate. But I co-signed it, and even all these years later, I'm here to defend the president of ESPN at that time, because we had gotten so political that we went away from giving the audience what it came to expect. You're coming to expect sports, and then we felt it was perfectly okay to just get into stuff that expanded beyond sports. You had the Colin Kaepernick protesting and kneeling. We saw the President Trump at the time hijack the narrative and turn it into some issue involving patriotism and all of this other stuff, when it really wasn't about that. It was about him getting back at owners who wouldn't let him become an owner in 2014 for the Buffalo Bills. And you saw all of this other stuff going on. And, we got away from giving the audience what the audience came to see. And I'm a businessman. And my attitude is, what do the patrons want? What are their expectations? What did they come to see? And if you know what that is, and you sign your name on the dotted line, committing to giving the audience that, then you owe it to them to give them that. And when Jimmy Pitaro was making the declaration that we weren't doing that to the degree that we once did, he was absolutely right. But once we got back to doing what we do, sports, politics, and all of that stuff in between, social commentary and stuff, it intertwines with the world of sports. It's inescapable. And now we get that. But 6 years ago or so, they didn't get it like they do now.
Right. But I suppose there's a reason you're doing that on your own as opposed to on the airwaves.
Well, again, because I'm a businessman and I'm thinking about the business of Stephen A. Smith. I'm not thinking about Stephen A. Smith, the employee. I'm thinking about straight shooter production, straight shooter media, and the kind of aspirations that I have. That doesn't mean that I want to go away, that I want to stop doing sports, that I want to stop working for the people that I work for. But they are keenly aware of the fact that I have a strong desire to expand. You would see me on News Nation a week before the election night doing a town hall. You see me on CNN. You see me on Fox News. You've seen me being interviewed by political commentators and what have you. I like doing that. You've seen me talking about P. Diddy 1 minute, Will Smith, Chris Rock the next, and so on and so forth. I'm one of those guys that wherever the pulse of the people are at, what is on their mind and what they're most interested in, I like to be a part of that dialogue and a part of that conversation. And so when you come to me, graduating from an HBCU, Winston-Salem State, struggling the way that I did to get to where I am, climbing up the charts from the New York Daily News as a high school reporter to the Philadelphia Inquirer, working on TV, CNN, SSI, to Fox Sports, to ESPN, I bust my ass to get to where I am. And I don't want anyone telling me, we're pigeonholing you in this box and we have you in this corner and that's where you belong and that's where you'll stay. I'm not rolling like that. That's not who I am and that's not who I'm going to be.
Okay, that's a good cue for, I want to read you a quote. You were profiled by GQ in 2019.
Okay, in 2019. I don't remember, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah. Your former colleague Max Kellerman had a quote about you.
Okay.
Stephen A. is never going to be happy. That's why he's successful. When you're on the top, when you're on top, the reason you're there is because you are a chronically dissatisfied person.
I think that's a bit excessive. I think that if you know me, if you know my inner circle, my family, my friends, my loved ones, I am a very happy man. I'm living a pretty good life.
Seems like it.
You know,
working real hard.
I work real hard because I love to work. I get that from my mama. God rest her soul, and I'm very proud of that. To me, I'm off when the job is done. I believe in excellence. I believe in doing the best that I possibly can do and exhausting every means necessary to be the best that I can be. But in the same breath, don't get it twisted. I know how to have a good time, and I have a good time quite often. It's just that, when people work with you, there's a level of intensity that I bring to the table. Nick Saban has one of my favorite quotes. Mediocre people don't like winners, and winners don't like mediocre people. And I listened to that, and I nodded my head in affirmation because you can work with people, and I'm certainly not talking about Max Kellerman here, but you can work with people, as I have in my career, and you run across people that they're fine with getting by. They're fine with punching that proverbial clock, turning it in, making sure they did their job, and that's all they got to do. No, there's a result at the end. We're in the ratings and revenue business. Are we winning? I don't care who I'm working for. This is one of the reasons that I believe that I'm one of the greatest people to work with, because I think about my partners just as much as I think about myself. Are we winning? If I'm winning, but you're losing, we're losing, because we have not achieved success for the both of us.
Right.
We know what the mandate is. And when you run across people that don't care about whether or not somebody else is winning, and all they're concerned about is the fact that they got theirs, they're very easy to spot. They're not difficult to locate. And when you have to work with them every day and you're committed to success, that's a very difficult proposition to partake of on each passing day. And I'm one of those people that I may not say much, but I want you to be uncomfortable with me. I want you to be uncomfortable around me. I want you to be around me, and you want to get away from me as fast as you can. If you mediocre and you satisfied with being mediocre and you don't give a damn and you don't care about the results, you don't care about winning, I want you uncomfortable. I really, really do. You know, people like the late, great Kobe Bryant, God rest his soul. You knew his mentality. Michael Jordan has been a friend of mine for years. You knew his mentality. I mean, these are people that were winners. And I believe in being a winner and exhausting yourself to do it.
I'm curious, you made the comment about people who are out for themselves, and I'm going to preface it by saying that's not what I'm implicating for you here, but you're in the middle of negotiating a really big new contract, right?
Okay.
At the same time that ESPN is firing a bunch of people. Do you see how that might rub some people the wrong way?
I can see that. I don't give a Let me tell you, let me answer that question why. That is one question. I'm not offended by the question, so I want to make sure you understand that. But that is a question that I'm not going to take from anybody. And I'm going to tell you why. I can't count the amount of examples where I saw people getting laid off, and then I see somebody come up right behind and get some contract. Business does business. You never know what's behind the goal of a business per se. What you do know is the work that you put in. If you're smart enough, what value comes with that work. And then at the same time, you also pride yourself in being very, very reasonable. I haven't, and I'm not going to talk about my contract negotiations with ESPN. They are ongoing. I think the talks have been very pleasant. I think we're making progress. We'll see what happens. If it works out, it works out. If it doesn't, I've got decisions to make because I got a future to think about. But I'm not going to sit up here like a baby and a child, understanding the world of business and what it entails, and whine and moan about whatever. At the end of the day, here's what it comes down to. The industry has changed. The people who are not paying attention to the changes that have taken place are going to get lost in the shuffle. It's not what it used to be. There was a metamorphosis that kicked in, a change that took place when I was in the newspaper industry and they were transitioning to .com, social media. The advent of social media came about. You know, you had people that were starting podcasts. Newspapers was getting left by the wayside, and you had newspaper journalists whining about the industry. Well, are you blind? You are reporters. You see what they're doing. You got to come up with something else. Okay? Sports radio. That had grown, that had blown up. But podcasting came about. Why? Because people didn't want to punch a clock and have to watch a show or listen to the show at one specific time. They wanted the flexibility of being able to call up your content whenever they wanted to, et cetera, et cetera. You saw how the business was changing. What are you going to do about it? Same thing with television. Now we've got streaming. Linear television is supposed to be dying. I will remind you, linear content is not. Linear television is. That means somebody doesn't want to have to buy a big ass TV to watch it in their house when they get home from work or whatever. They want to be able to watch it on their phone. They want to be able to watch it on their iPad. They want to be able to watch it on their laptop. This is what they want to be able to do. You have to know these things. In the process of knowing these things, you build an audience. You build content. You're a content provider. You're doing all of these things. And then the people that you work for benefit from that. They master how to monetize it, or at least they hope to. And they go about the business of putting it out there so folks can get paid. And then when it's your time, you're supposed to act oblivious and ignorant to all of that and say, let me think about everybody else but myself, when I've been working all of these years and didn't ask for, and my contract wasn't up. I didn't ask for a contract extension. I didn't ask somebody to rip it up or whatever. My deal was there. You're locked in until June 2025. I've honored my word. I showed up. I performed, I did what I needed to do, and so now a negotiation takes place, and hopefully the two sides can come to an accord, and if we can't, we can't, but business is business. I harbor no animosity whatsoever. All I ask for anybody out there that's looking at me is to understand, just like a business has a right to look out for its business, Stephen A. has a right to look out for Stephen A.'s business.
Without getting into the particulars, seems like you want to stay at ESPN, right? That would be your preference?
In a perfect world, Jimmy Pitaro is a great boss. He's a good man. It's hard when you look at the world and how divisive it is, how sleazy it can be, and what have you, to run across a man that you genuinely like. You know, that's how I feel about Jimmy Pitaro. Bob Iger's another level. I revere this man. I idolize Bob Iger. I've known him for years, and I think that he's a marvelous leader. And what he has done for the Disney family, to be in-house and to see the obstacles and to see how he's maneuvered his way through that terrain for that 16-year run before he retired, and what he had to facilitate cleaning up once he got back, despite so many reports and troubles and all of this other stuff. To have a relationship with somebody like that where you see him give you advice about you personally, about your personal affairs, about things that have nothing to do with the job, but it's going to help you grow as a human being and as a man. I can't say enough about him. You don't have that every day. And so on that level, when I think about that, I think about a Burke Magnus, who I've got a good relationship with, the Dave Roberts, who I have a long-standing relationship with. Yeah, on that level, you don't want to leave when you have people like that. But they are fully aware that while I have a desire to still do some of the things that I do, I also have a desire to do my own thing. And I'm not going to let anything stop me.
So if you, in this new deal, you would not want to fold the stuff you're doing outside into the contract. You want to make sure that you have the right to do stuff outside.
Absolutely. And I will not do anything that disallows that.
And is there anything you're not doing now that you want to add to the plate?
No, I mean, it's not so much that. What happens is that once you have a taste of success, everybody wants a piece of the action. And, well, there's pieces of the action I can't have as somebody that's worked there, even though I've contributed to the success of what they have. So just like they achieved the success on their own based on their creative and what they built, what I've created and what I'm building, I want for myself.
Right.
And so, that's really what it is. Again, it's the talks are going well. There's nothing bad going on despite the reports and stuff like that. I'm alarmed at how ignorant folks are.
I don't think the reports are that things are going bad. The reports are that,
well, they're saying
they offer X, you want Y.
Well, they've been wrong. How about that? Okay. They've been wrong. But I let them do that. And cause I like to see, as a journalist, I've been a journalist. Yes, I'm a personality and all this stuff, but New York Daily News, Philadelphia Inquirer, I've been a journalist for nearly 30 years.
Right.
And there's a whole bunch of people that write that are still in those press boxes when I was there. I know who they are. I know how they think. I know what they're going to say before they say it. I know who they're talking to. I know who leaks information to them. I know this. Okay? They're not fooling the damn soul. I just let them do it because I want to see who's going to. Because I like to see who's going to have the audacity to smile in my face when you say something. I had somebody, I'm not going to mention his name because I don't want to put him on Front Street, but I had somebody write a story about a colleague of mine and something negative that they had to say about me. Now, that bastard was in front of my face.
I assume we're talking about Pat McAfee.
No, not at all. I swear to you. I said, I'm not talking about my colleague. I'm talking about the reporter.
No, I know. I thought the story was about...
No, it's nothing about Pat McAfee.
Got it.
And so that reporter was in front of my face 3 weeks earlier, interviewing us when we had the town hall in front of the media. Never mentioned a word about what the person said. Not a syllable. And then I read the paper, and I'm like, you ain't asked me about this, but you took that quote and you ran with that. You watch stuff, and I'm in the business, and I've been in the business for years, so I know this. And when you are doing certain things that I think cross the line of ethics and what have you, I like to know who you are. I'm not going to do anything to you. You're not worth it. But I like to know who you are, just so I can look at you. And when you look at me, you'll know, I know who you are. That's all.
You mentioned being a journalist. You've probably interviewed just about every famous athlete on the planet, at least in a certain sports. Is there one that you find the most challenging to interview?
The most challenging interview? I don't find anybody the most challenging interview as long as they know how to talk. As long as you know how to talk, I feel like I can interview a cockroach, to be honest with you. I can talk to anybody.
Is there someone you haven't interviewed that you want to?
I want to interview Barack Obama. I want him to sit in front of me and defend some of the people he defends to my face. I want him to take some of the positions that he takes. I'm not going to say I don't want to interview Donald Trump. It would be fascinating because, you see, how can you say I'm going to be respectful, but in the same breath, I'm not going to let you BS? You're not going to get away with it.
Right.
I would try that. He's not going to be able to look at me and say, you didn't say hello. How are you? Before you ask me these questions like he did at the National Association of Black Journalists. He's not going to be able to do that. But definitely him. That would come to mind. And, you know, that's really about it.
Politicians.
I'd love to interview Benjamin Netanyahu. Wouldn't bother me at all. I'd love to do that interview. I would love that. Ted Cruz is crazy in his own way, but I'd like to talk to him because he speaks his mind, you know? And so all right, I like talking to folks who are unafraid to say what they feel based on their facts. That doesn't bother me. I'm bothered if you ignore the facts. I'm bothered if you do that on purpose. But if you believe something and you have the facts that back up your belief, let the people decide. Tell them what it is and let them decide.
So you mentioned Obama. What are the things that you want to see him stand up behind?
No, I just think that, you know, Barack Obama is a person, obviously, profound respect. First black president of the United States of America, wonderful first family, best first lady I've ever seen, et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, when I think I'm a centrist and I think the world is cyclical, sometimes you need certain policies, sometimes you need certain others. And when people are dogged in their beliefs and they're one-sided and there's not much room to leverage, to budge, I don't know how beneficial that is for us as a society. Think if we as American citizens and we're human beings were that way. This is what I believe. There's not a damn thing you could do to change my mind. This is what I believe. I'm not changing. Where are we going? I'm not budging either. Where are we going? I think one of the problems when we look at the world of politics today is that they're not doing any work. All their work is during the campaign. Once they're in office, they don't have to do a damn thing. Do you realize they don't even have to read policy? And they can literally just say, I'm going to vote along with the side that I'm on. We got to march lockstep with one another. We're Republican, we're Democrat. This is where we got to vote. Really, that's what they're doing.
Well, that's a politics issue. That doesn't strike me as an Obama issue.
No, that's not Obama. That's not an Obama issue. I'm not saying that is. I'm saying talking to him about a climate and a culture that some people would credit him towards. Some people would tell you his presidency caused just as much as divisiveness as anybody else. I don't believe that. But I'm fascinated by people who believe that and why, and I'm fascinated as to what he would have to say about that.
Yeah.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did.
I think I did.
Yeah, you did.
Okay.
You familiar with the stock market?
Not really. I have financial people about that. I know I monitor my money. I know that.
Are you familiar with the concept of buying, selling, and holding a stock?
Yeah.
You can buy something if you believe in it. You sell it if you don't. You hold it if you're
Yes.
Can I give you some sports and see where you're at on them?
Sure, we could do that.
Okay. Let's do 3 older sports: baseball, boxing, and golf.
Buying or selling?
Buy, sell, hold, those 3.
I would sell boxing. I don't like what I'm seeing. The promoters have ruined the sport. They need somebody like Dana White overseeing the sport so you can give us the fights we want to see when we want to see them, as opposed to dudes being able to avoid one another because they might get knocked out, and then obviously it will compromise their revenue generating ability. But we also need to do a better job of taking care of the boxers. I think Capitol Hill has to get involved in that regard. I would tell you that I'm buying baseball.
Having a good year.
And well, it's not just that. I think the rules changes, the pitch count, the shifting, the clock, the game has sped up. We're seeing more athleticism that's been incorporated in the sport of baseball. I think that's going to contribute to diversifying the sport. Now, it was only about 6% black a couple of years ago. It's crawling up, but I think that you'll see more athleticism coming into the sport. I think that's important. And what was the other sport?
Golf. You're holding golf.
Golf. Look, I know Tiger Woods was there. And I understand it's a meritocracy and you got to be able to play. But there is nothing about golf that says to me I'm invited. Nothing. I mean, it costs a boatload of money to be a member of a club. You understand? You got to buy your golf clubs. You understand what I'm saying? You're losing balls all the time. They ain't cheap. You got to have a caddy. You got to have a cart because you're not trying to walk 18 holes. And, it's at a country club that, the only time you really see black folks there is they're working. That's what it was for a long period of time. And I understand that Tiger Woods contributed to diversifying it to some degree, but there's just nothing about the sport, from the people who cover it, the people who talk about it, the people who participate in it. There is nothing about the sport that says to me, black folks, come on in. I don't see that in golf.
Yeah.
So I'd sell that.
Okay. Selling 2, 1 buy. Good. 3 sports on the rise: UFC, WNBA, soccer.
Well, soccer's international. Soccer's not going anywhere. It's on the rise in America. Yeah, Messi in Florida, that's nice. But the bottom line is, as long as the NFL exists here, you're behind the curve because, football is football in America. NFL, it ain't soccer. So I would say that it's on the rise. It is what it is globally. On America, it's an incremental rise. I think that when you look at the UFC, I think the UFC is very popular. I think Dana White has done a marvelous job in growing the sport the way that he has. It's great to see great matches. I just think they got to get more, and it won't happen per se. But I think that something that would go a long way towards elevating the success of the UFC is to incorporate the knockout even more. America loves knockouts.
Yeah, when you watch him,
we don't want to see submissions.
Yeah.
We don't want to see guillotine chokeholds. All right, that's fine. Wow, okay, but you don't want to see somebody. I saw John Bones Jones get into the octagon one day. He maneuvered left, maneuvered right, grabbed this guy by both of his arms and choked him with his own arms. It was over in 45 seconds. That's not box office. But Conor McGregor knocking out Aldo in 13 seconds, you still saw that knockout.
Yeah.
So it's what Americans appeal to. So I would say that's going to still be on the rise. Plus, boxing has helped the rise of the UFC because of the organizational structure that Dana White has made sure to ensure, or rather was incorporated, and I think that helps them. Now, what was your third sport?
WNBA.
Definitely on the rise. I think the women have done a marvelous job, but we're not going to run from the elephant in the room. Caitlin Clark, you better recognize. Average 17,000 in attendance at home, 15,000 on the road. Attendance increased by 319%. Merchandise sales up like 450%. Not most, not all, but there was some jealousy. There was some resentment. And it's very, very understandable. You've got sisters that were in the WNBA that toiled through that terrain, that bust their tails to be the best that they could possibly be and uplift the sport, and couldn't get the notoriety, couldn't get the television coverage, couldn't get the media coverage, couldn't get the sponsors and advertisers bought in, couldn't do any of that. Well, you know something? Caitlin Clark changed all of that. 2 weeks on the job, she had them on chartered flights. 2 weeks, okay? Attendance soared, WNBA draft ratings, opening night ratings on ABC, et cetera, a rising tide lifts all boats. Magic Johnson and Larry Bird were champions. But when Michael Jordan came along, they said, yo, this brother different. And we gonna ride this wave because that benefits us all. I think that a lot of the ladies with the WNBA were slow to get to that point. And that's what hurt them. But I think they're here. The ratings for the playoffs have been great, but nothing like Caitlin Clark. She is a galvanizing force of nature to be reckoned with, and I think that she has done wonders and will continue to do wonders for women's basketball. I think it was stupid for Team USA to not have her on the team, because you should have had her on there, because she would have blew up the popularity of the sport globally which would have assisted in the sport growing even more. And I think that that was a missed opportunity, but I don't think it's going away. It shouldn't go away. And I think the WNBA is going to be here to stay.
Okay, we'll end on NBA then. What's your finals prediction?
Well, right now, I think the favorite has to be the Boston Celtics. I would tell you that a lot of people are talking about the Oklahoma City Thunder. They're the best team in the West. I find it hard to count out Jokic in Denver. I just find that very, very difficult to believe, and I'm not sleeping on Minnesota with Julius Randle, Anthony Edwards, Rudy Gobert, etc. If I had to pick, I would tell you it would be Boston versus the Denver Nuggets. But I have a license to be fluid. Fluid.
You got a long ways to go.
Yeah, license to be fluid.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Fascinating stuff from Stephen A. So he's had to reinvent his career as well. Originally as a newspaper writer and now as a pundit and a commentator and a movie star, right? I mean, he's big time from a personality standpoint, and he's almost a caricature unto himself. But at the end of the day, in his case, at the beginning of the day, he was a journalist, a really smart, and he's able to use his personality in a big time way. So you've heard from Stephen A., you've heard Le Batard talk about the change in sports media, and Rich Eisen as well. I hope you understand that what we do today isn't what we did 3 years ago. And what we're doing now, we may not be doing 3 or 4 years from now either. As technologies evolve and as the next generation's media consumption habits and media consumption desires change, we've got to change with them. That does it for today. Talk with you soon.